Hey, what's going on, Jam fam? So today we're going to talk about Barry. Now, full disclosure, I am not fully done pushing Barry yet. I only have him around 400 trophies at the time of recording this video, but I do think he's an extremely strong brawler. So today I just want to talk about him a little bit, talk about what I like about him, what I dislike about him, and what I think needs to change to make him a little more balanced with everybody else in the roster. So again, I am not the best type of player of this game. So if you think that I'm off base with anything that I say, or if you just want to add to the conversation at all, make sure you drop it in the comments. I'll read your comments and I'll give it a heart and all that stuff. So anyway, let's talk about Barry. Let's get into the video. All right, so let's kick things off with the good stuff about Barry, and all of these things are really going to compound on top of each other when we get to the end of it. So let's just kick things off with the most simple thing, and that's going to be his area of control potential. Now, Barry's going to work a lot like Barley. They both throw a pool of liquid on the ground. If anybody walks into that liquid, they're going to take damage, and if they stand in it, they're going to take more damage. Now, the main difference between Barley and Barry's attack is that Barry's attack is going to be about half as big as Barley's attack, but it's going to last like 3 times as long. And in my opinion, that duration difference is the main reason why Barry is so good at area of control. He can basically just stack up a bunch of those pools in a single area, and it makes it extremely hard for enemies to walk around them because the pools just won't go away. They just sit there and last forever. This means you can take Barry into a mode like Hot Zone and just spam attacks onto the zone, and it makes it impossible for enemies to actually stay in the zone without taking damage. Or in a mode like Gem Grab or Brawl Ball, you just spam choke points and make it impossible for them to move up the map without taking damage. It's just super obnoxious, and it can be like sometimes oppressive in my opinion. All right, the next thing I love about Barry, and that's basically just going to be his healing. Now, in my opinion, Barry is probably the second best healer in the game, but not necessarily because of the raw healing numbers that he has. It's more about his trait, but we'll talk about his trait in just a second here. As far as his healing, he basically works just like Byron. His main attacks are going to do healing over time if people stand in the pools, and his super is going to do a burst heal if you crash into your teammates with it. The fact that he can do both makes him extremely versatile, in my opinion, because sometimes your teammates are just going to need a little bit of healing, so you're just going to throw an attack towards their way, and hopefully they step onto the pool, or sometimes they're going to need the healing right away, and you can use your super to burst heal them up by like 3,000, which is extremely useful. Now, as far as group healing, it's going to be debatable if he's better than Poco or not. Poco does have the Capo and his super, and it's very easy to just spam attacks and your super to heal up an entire team, so you can keep people topped off very easily with Poco. But as far as healing over time, he's definitely going to be better than Pam, in my opinion, just because his healing is tied to his main attack and not to a single area like Pam's. And then as far as Byron, it's going to be a toss-up about like the fact that they're both very versatile, right? But I think the main difference is that Barry can actually heal himself on his own without using a gadget, where Byron cannot. Byron has to use a gadget to heal himself, or his super, where Barry can just drop a pool at his feet and heal himself up. So while Barry is actually a very versatile healer, I don't think that's exactly what makes him the best healer in the game. I think the thing that makes him the best healer in the game is actually his trait. Now, there's often a drawback to being a healer in Brawl Stars, and that's going to be the fact that when you're healing up your teammates, you do not charge your super. So you think like when Byron attacks his teammates and heals them up, he's not charging his super at the same time. He only gets supercharged when he hits an enemy. Barry actually doesn't suffer from this drawback like all the other healers does because he has this trait that makes it so that whenever he heals his teammates or himself, he actually charges super. So as a result, Barry is actually rewarded the exact same amount with his attacks, whether he is healing up his teammates or damaging enemies, unlike other brawlers where they're either making a trade-off. They're either not charging their super and healing their teammates, or they're dealing damage and charging their super. There is no in-between for them. Now, as a side note, I don't know why this trait wasn't added to the game beforehand. It kind of just makes sense on a brawler like Byron, where he can innately, like without a star power or whatever, heal up teammates and enemies. It just makes sense that he would charge his super from that as well, but they never added it to Byron, and Barry's the first one to get this, so I kind of hope Byron gets this in the future. Anyway, let's get back to Barry. Now, because of this trait, you always have something to do with your attacks, whether that's helping out your teammates, healing up yourself, or damaging enemies, and that means you're always going to be charging super as well, so you're going to get a ton of supers, and Barry's super is extremely good. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, but like I said, because of this trait and Barry's versatility as a healer, he is going to be the best healer in the game. He's just an amazingly good support, and that's why I got to say that here. But let's talk about his super now. All right, so now we're going to talk about Barry's super, but when I started glazing up Barry, I did say that everything was going to compound on top of each other, and it comes to a head here on his super. Now, the first thing I talked about was Barry's area of control, and then I talked about his healing, and all of that combines right here onto his super. It does both of those things extremely well, and it's like an insane amount of utility from one super that you can constantly charge up, and it feeds back into itself constantly. Now, Berry Super is a dash that leaves the pools of ice cream all over the place. It's absolutely insane, and like I said, it combines with everything else in his kit because these pools are the area of control that enemies cannot walk on top of without taking damage, which is going to charge his super, and if your teammates walk on top of it, they're going to heal themselves up, which charges Berry Super. So it feeds back into itself, like I said. But the thing I didn't pay attention to during the sneak peeks, and I didn't really realize it until I was playing Berry, is that if you directly crash into an enemy or a teammate, it's going to do a ton of burst damage or direct healing, which is actually kind of crazy if you think about it, because it gives Berry, a healer, a way to assassinate squishy brawlers once they take a little bit of damage, or it gives him a burst heal, which, like I said, makes him a very versatile healer when everything else is combined. So Berry's absolutely a nuts brawler in terms of synergy across his entire kit. Like I said, he's got very good area of control in his attack and super, and those also heal up your teammates, and he's got a trait that charges his super when you heal up teammates. So you can basically just be like a one-stop shop for all the support a team needs, pretty much, and that's crazy. But unfortunately, Berry is not a perfect brawler. He does have a couple of drawbacks, so I do want to talk about those really quick. So let's talk about what Berry fails to do very well. All right, so this is the part of the video where I actually talk about what Berry's actually bad at, but keep in mind that Berry is actually one of the best brawlers in the entire game right now. So while I am going to say what he struggles with, that doesn't mean he is a bad brawler. He's actually a great brawler. These are just more about his limitations and what you need to think about while you are playing Berry. So let's get into it. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is going to be Berry's range. Now, obviously, Berry is a thrower, so it's not going to be the end of the world. It's not like he's going to be, like, totally outranged by everything in the entire world, because he can still attack around walls and everything. But it is something to keep in mind because he is a very short-range thrower. He's basically a melee brawler that can attack over walls for all intents and purposes. Now, like I said, Berry is a thrower, so depending on the map, this is not the biggest deal in the world. A good wall can be Berry's best friend, because if you're outranged by somebody, you can just take advantage of the wall, hide behind it, and use that until they, get in range, or you get a teammate that's near them. And even on more open maps, you can just throw attacks on the ground while you're moving up the map to heal yourself up in case you take chip damage. So you can close the distance in certain ways, especially with your super or something like that. There is ways that Berry can play around his range limitations. But you will find yourself in a tricky situation from time to time. For example, throwers that outrange Berry a lot, he's going to struggle with. And if there is a sniper that significantly outranges Berry and has a wall break, for example, Brock or Piper, those are going to be a pretty tough matchup for Berry from time to time. But like I said, Berry does have tools in his kit that do make these matchups easier if you know how to play around them. For example, like I said, you can self-heal off the damage with your main attacks and then charge up your super from that self-healing and dive on the enemy or just get closer to them. That's a good way to deal with these situations, or just rely on your teammates to close the gap or take out those bad matchups and just heal them up when they take chip damage. So those types of things Berry can definitely, work around, but you do need to keep it in mind when you do come across these matchups. Now, the next thing that Berry is going to struggle with, in my opinion, is going to be damage. Now, like I said, his burst damage on his super is very good. That's going to do like 3,000 damage. So that's not what I'm specifically talking about here. I'm actually talking about just his main attacks. Normally, one tick from his main attack is going to do 1,300 damage, and it's very often that you only get that first tick of damage. Most of the time, people are going to move out of your pools. Unless you like trap them in a corner or something like that, you're not going to get more than one tick of damage out of them. 1,300 damage is just not a lot of damage for Brawl Stars nowadays. There's just going to be times when brawlers escape with a couple hundred HP that you can't do anything about, or there's just going to be brawlers that have way too much HP for Berry to deal with by himself, and they're going to jump on you. Something like an assassin or a tank. When they get on top of you, if you don't have your super, you're kind of screwed. Well, I shouldn't say you're screwed, because Berry does have two things in his kit that do help him deal with brawlers that get on top of him too quickly. That's going to be his first gadget that has a knockback and a heal on it, so you can cause some separation between yourself and an opponent with that. And of course, his super will allow him to dive and get away from enemies, so you can use that to help save yourself a little bit. So Berry does have a couple of tools that do help him deal with tanks and assassins, just causing separation to help him get away. And I should mention that his second star power does also give him a small damage buff on the initial impact of his attack. So that can help with like damaging and finishing off opponents from time to time. But that also is not a perfect solution because, like I said, that only affects the initial damage of his attack. So if you don't land an attack directly on top of an opponent, you really basically are not having a star power at all. It doesn't affect the damage over time that people get when they walk into the pool. So you have to land your attacks directly if you really want to benefit from that star power. And at this point in my push, I have exclusively used the first star power, so I don't know if the second star power actually solves this problem, and I'm just complaining about nothing because I'm running the wrong kit on Barry. So I'm going to try to use the second star power as I, continue my push up to 600 trophies here. But I just wanted to mention that in my experience so far, Barry has struggled with damage in times, and it can be a little bit frustrating. Like I said, Barry does have tools that get him out of those sticky situations, so there is that. But maybe the second star power solves all this, and I'm complaining about nothing. Let me know what you think down in the comments. All right, and the final thing that I think Barry really struggles with is going to be his reload speed. And honestly, this is the most frustrating thing about Barry, in my opinion. His reload speed is so slow. Like, oh my god, it has to be the slowest in the entire game for all I know. I cannot think of another brawler that takes as long to reload shots as Barry does. And I get that this is a balancing thing because Barry's attacks sit on the ground for so long that if you gave him a fast reload speed, he would just fill up the entire map with ice cream. But like I said before, Barry has a lot of things to do with his main attack between healing himself, healing his teammates, and damaging enemies that it just gets frustrating to have no ammo all the time because you're so busy doing everything else. And this is also frustrating because Barry has a dive super, so if you're diving in on an enemy and you don't have ammo and you miss your dive, or if, they survive with a couple hundred HP, then you're not going to be able to do a ton of damage because you have no ammo when you get in. You might be able to get one attack off on them, but they're going to run away, so, you're only going to get that 1,300 tick damage, so it's not always a good situation to dive on people, and, if you have to stop to reload, then you're going to be, missing your chance to dive on them efficiently, so it's not always, a great situation, and, I get it's a balancing thing, but it's just frustrating sometimes. And again, Barry's first star power does give him a reload speed buff when he's standing in one of his pools of ice cream, but I found this star power to be a little bit overrated, and I don't think it helped very much, which is why I want to try the other star power when I continue to push him. This star power has two major drawbacks that I didn't think about when I was watching the sneak peeks, and the first one's going to be simply that we just move a lot in Brawl Stars. We move side to side to dodge attacks, we move back and forth to get closer and further away from enemies, and it's just hard to sit in your pool of ice cream to pick up your reload speed buff a lot of the time. And the second problem is that the reload speed buff doesn't last after you walk off of the pool, and the pool is extremely small, so it's just you get the reload speed buff for, half a second, and then you have to move because you're dodging attacks or getting closer or something like that, and you just lose the reload speed buff as soon as you step off it, which really sucks in my opinion. And it could just be me, but I feel like the reload speed buff isn't even that impactful. I feel like you only reload maybe one ammo the entire time you're standing on it before, the pool runs out. I could be wrong, but it just feels like it's not that impactful overall, so I'm just not a big fan of it, and I'm ready to switch to the other star power to see if that one's a little bit better. So yeah, while Barry is the best brawler in the entire game right now, he's not a perfect brawler, and you just need to keep in mind his drawbacks when you're playing him. That way you can play around them. Like I said, the big three for me were going to be his damage. It's a little bit low. His range being, again, a little bit low. He does get outranged from time to time. And his reload speed being extremely long. So you need to pay attention to how much ammo you have before you dive in on people. And, if you're in a matchup where people can jump on you, you need to make sure you have those saved up for, when people get close to you. But he's still one of the best brawlers in the entire game. So if you're a little bit competent, you should be able to play around these limitations, no problem. Alright, so like I said many times in this video, I do think Barry is one of the best brawlers in the entire game right now, and I do think he needs a couple of nerfs to help bring him back in line with the rest of the rosters. So, I just want to go over what changes I would like to see brought to Barry before we end this video, so let's talk about those really quick. Alright, the first thing that I'm going to suggest is going to be adjusting Barry's trait. Now, I don't think the trait needs to be removed entirely. I think it's a very good trait, and it's very, useful to have, and like I said, I would like to see it get added to Byron at some point, but I do think it's the main thing that makes Barry the best healer in the game, and it's also what gives him a ton of supers, throughout a match. So I would like to see it get adjusted a little bit. Now, my initial gut says that he shouldn't charge super from healing himself up, but I do feel like that is an extremely heavy nerf, so I don't know if that's, the perfect one right there. I could see it possibly happening where, if he's healing himself, he doesn't charge super, but I think what's more realistic is to just nerf the total super that he charges by about 10%. That might be a little bit low, but I think that's a good starting point to see, how much of a difference that would actually make for him. So just nerfing it a little bit, total supercharge rate-wise, I think is the right way to go, as a good step forward. All right, next thing I want to talk about is going to be Barry's super. Now, I think that Barry's direct damage from his super needs to be nerfed down just a little bit. I don't think the healing needs to be touched because I think that makes him a very good versatile healer, like I said, but I think the damage is just a little overwhelming when you consider everything else the super brings to the table. In one super, you can heal up your teammates for 3,000 HP, you can deal 3,000 damage to every enemy you hit directly, and it leaves down a massive area of effect that can damage enemies or heal up your team as well, and it's just crazy utility from one singular super. So, like I said, it needs to bring down the direct damage to, you know, help nerf that a little bit. Again, I think the healing is perfectly fine. Healing up your teammates is Barry's main thing, so I wouldn't want to see that get touched. But the direct damage, he shouldn't be able to assassinate people with it, you know? And the last thing that I could see them actually nerfing on Barry is going to be the knockback from his first gadget. I feel like they could probably remove that knockback on the first gadget, and it would be a totally normal change for Brawl Stars. Now, I only briefly mentioned this first gadget, and that's because it's not like the craziest gadget in the world. All it really does is it gives you a 1k burst heal on yourself and any teammate around you, and if there's an enemy, it's going to knock them back a couple of tiles. Now, that's not a crazy good gadget, but it does have a lot of uses. You know, like I said, it's a burst heal that can, you know, heal yourself and teammates, and you're going to charge super off that, and if a tank is on you or an assassin's on you, you can use it to get them off of you very quickly. Again, I don't feel like it's an oppressive gadget, and I don't feel like it totally needs a nerf. It doesn't need to remove that knockback entirely, in my opinion. But like I said, when I mentioned this, it's a very normal thing for Brawl Stars to remove that type of knockback from a brawler when they're super OP. So I could totally see them making this change, and it might be unfortunate, and it might actually like hurt Barry a lot more than I realized, but I could see them making that change. So yeah, overall, I really like Barry. Like I said, I'm going to continue pushing him. I want to get him up to around 600 trophies because, like I said, that's my normal like trophy range. And I feel like he's going to be a brawler that becomes like one of my regular brawlers because he just brings a lot of utility to a team and I really enjoy playing him. But I just wanted to take a minute today to talk about the brawler, let you guys know what I think about him. And again, if you guys disagree with me about any of this stuff, or if you want to add to the conversation at all, make sure you leave a comment down in the comment section. I'll read your comments. I'll leave a heart on it, all that fun stuff. So anyway, but that's going to do it for today. Remember, if you enjoyed my rambling, make sure you leave a like on the video, and if you're new, consider dropping a sub as well. But that's going to do it. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.